I'm Mira Rubin, and I'm here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is surrender. Surrender means to give up, relinquish control, relinquish authority, perhaps. And how does that work with spiritual surrender? So we get to talk about that today. Should be interesting as always. I love these conversations with you. But before we get started, let's take a minute or two to get present. So let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, and bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, all your molecules, all your electrons, creating this brilliant beam of light from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's just gently press our palms together and very, very softly rub your fingers against your palms to feel the deliciousness of that sensation and the tickling, the tingling, and allow that sensation to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable body, this remarkable physical form that enables you to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good morning, Robin. So good to have you here with us this morning. Welcome to everybody else who's joining us. It's great to be here with you. So we're talking about surrender, and I'm date me, but I grew up with The Wizard of Oz. When I was a tiny little kid, I watched The Wizard of Oz over and over and over again on TV. You know, it was, in fact, it was before the days of DVDs or CDs or videotapes. And it would come on every year and I would watch it every year for years and years. So I'm sure at a very formative age. So I'm sure it has impacted my psyche in ways as yet to be discovered. However, one of the scenes in The Wizard of Oz is when the Wicked Witch of the West is chasing Dorothy down, and she says, "Surrender, Dorothy." And what it emblazoned in my awareness or beingness or whatever is giving up. You know, it was like, give up the fight. And as I've been engaged in a spiritual evolution process, the word surrender has a whole different connotation, but I haven't seemed to escape this whole surrender Dorothy thing. So Robin says, ditto, ran every year when the witch and the money came and the monkeys came out. Yes. Yeah. Do, 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 do. That's what it was, right? You forgive me for my singing or lack of it. Anyway, so if you haven't seen the movie, you must see it. The Wizard of Oz is a classic. And you know, as I think of it now, actually, maybe this is a really good topic to talk about the Wizard of Oz and the metaphors in the Wizard of Oz. You know, the fears that we have, and coming home, what home means, and home is really coming home to ourselves. So it might be fun to explore all those meanings or interpretations around the Wizard of Oz. Anyway, and looking outside ourselves for solutions for salvation. Anyway, when we think about surrender, you know, we in the context of spiritual transformation, we talk about how we need to surrender the self to a higher purpose or to a higher knowing. And so what does that mean? And of course, you know, I did my nerdy thing this morning, which was look up the definition of surrender. So, and it usually has that connotation of giving up. That's not necessarily an elevated kind of connotation. So it says to yield something to the possession or power of another, deliver up possession of, on demand or under duress. So that's part of the definition. For instance, to surrender the fort to the enemy, to surrender the stolen goods to the police, for instance, to give oneself up as to the police. Good morning, Gia. So good to have you here with us this morning. We're talking about surrender. And then to give up, abandon, or relinquish. And the examples are comfort, hope, etc. To yield or resign an office or a privilege in favor of another. To give oneself up as to the power of another, submit or yield. So all these definitions of surrender are kind of in a context that is not the most empowering, right? But when we talk about sweet surrender, or we talk about surrender to a higher power, we are giving up the fight to maintain our separation, right? Isn't that what that's about? Like that we're yielding to something that is more expansive than what we have access to otherwise. You know, we're surrendering our ego or our individual identity, for instance, our definition as separate to find union with something broader and greater. Robin says several areas of the movie talking about the Wizard of Oz. Maybe I will talk about the Wizard of Oz tomorrow. Maybe you'll help me have that conversation tomorrow, because I think I never really looked at all the metaphors in it. And, you know, it was such a formative thing in my life. So it'd be fun to explore it. So several areas of the movie scared me as a young child. I'm unable to watch scary, violent movies even today. Well, there were some really scary parts of that movie. The monkeys, the flying monkeys going to hunt down Dorothy was really, really scary. And the Wicked Witch was really, really scary. I'll get you, my little pretty. And your little dog too, right? This is just scary, terrifying. For those of you who haven't seen The Wizard of Oz, that was a spoiler alert. Anyway, or it was a spoiler. Anyway, so Gia says, my favorite topic, surrender. Oof, what a relief sometimes. It's tough initially, but when you understand it, totally, you would love this state of being. To be able to surrender in itself is such a higher state. Well, I love your comment. What a relief sometimes. So when we finally let go of trying, to fight things, when we finally decide to go in the direction the river is flowing, rather than swimming upstream, then we can have a beautiful ride, right? And so it's just so interesting. Like for me, Robin says, I am an empath. You know, Robin, I believe you, and I know that I am quite empathic myself. And one of the things that, good morning, Elaine. Welcome. We haven't seen you for a little while. It's great to have you back. Um, so when the thing with folks who are empathic is that often we experience, we tune in to other energies around us. And I know as a kid, for instance, I would do that without recognizing and realizing that what the emotions that I was experiencing weren't originating in me, that I was sort of picking up what was going on around me. And I have to say that and this is contemporary right now, even right today, one of the most powerful things I have found to normalize my energy is is the affirmation, I'm me and only me. It doesn't mean that I'm not connected with other people. It doesn't mean that I'm not part of a greater whole, at least in my speaking of it. It doesn't mean that. What it means is that my physical experience, I'm allowing my physical experience, my psychic experience to be reflective of my own field. So for instance, like I'll get aches and pains that are just so random. And when I presence myself to I'm me and only me, those aches and pains go away. And so it's a powerful, powerful thing for me to, it's like creating the integrity of my energetic field. And that way, then I have the ability to sense into other beings, other experiences by choice, rather than being at the effect of all of that stuff glomming onto me in some way or another. So Elaine says, loving the practice of surrendering all that no longer serves love, the one true self. Yes. So with this conversation of surrendering, what we're talking about, or where my challenge, my personal challenge has come from, and this is why we were talking about the Wizard of Oz, is because surrender always, for me, had the association of giving up. And somehow, for me anyway, just me, this is not necessarily so for you, the notion of giving up is not the same as the notion of letting go or expanding to include. And giving up in my association has had to do with resignation, being resigned, resigning, abandoning a fight, for instance, and I don't mean a fight, but maybe abandoning a cause or an intention or whatever. And so this notion of surrender in the context of spirituality, it makes sense, as it is giving up the fight. Stop fighting. Just allow yourself to open and expand and be present, right? And instead of fighting. Let go of these ideas that keep us separate. So Elaine says, yes, that seems to be the beginning stages of awakening to what surrender is not. And then we remember what surrender is for me. Exactly. So there's a place where when we let go of the resistance, that's really what surrender is relinquishing the resistance, and the resistance to beingness, the resistance to the flow of life, right? It's not giving up in a bad way. It's kind of like giving up an addiction to something. You know, Rosalind, I know I don't see you here in comments this morning, and I'm hoping you're okay because you have been such a loyal part of our community every morning. So I'm just sending out love to you, and I'll invite everybody else to do so as well. Kimberly, good morning. Good morning. So good to have you here with us. So we're talking about surrender. And I think for me, in my awareness, surrender had to do with loss. And the interesting thing is that when we think about spiritual surrender, rather than loss, it's expansion, right? It's like letting go of the things that are keeping us limited and bound and separate, and to allow ourselves to go with the flow of life. So Elaine says to allow what is to be and no longer resisting it. And once the inner standing, oh, I love that, is complete, the program dissolves. It's no longer needed. Exactly, exactly. So when we allow ourselves to relinquish the fight, you know, the resistance, really, when we stop resisting, then life will carry us in a very, very different way. There you are, Rosalind. Okay, so great. I'm so glad you're here. And thanks for chiming in. Welcome, welcome. So, and just so you know how appreciated you are, all of you. And anyway, so surrender. I think it's so interesting how that movie, The Wizard of Oz, with Surrender Dorothy, that was written in the sky in the movie, Surrender Dorothy. And that was kind of the connotation. So Elaine says, oh, I love The Wizard of Oz. It was my favorite movie as a child. It didn't scare me, though. I thought it was fascinating. I thought it was fascinating. I watched it over and over and over. That's what we're talking about too. So did I. It shaped me. And the same for Robin, and who knows how many of the rest of us, you know, grew up with The Wizard of Oz. So maybe tomorrow we get to talk about The Wizard of Oz, because like I said, I never really looked closely at all of the metaphors in it and the messages in it, and certainly it shaped me very, very dramatically. But anyway, the Surrender Dorothy thing was like, never give up, you know, like I that's where my response came from. And it's really interesting to look at that in the context of the fight of the ego, you know, our righteousness, and I'm not vilifying the ego. I think what we get to do is to befriend the ego, but in its less elevated expressions, you know, where the ego's righteousness is insisting upon upon maintaining our separateness, you know. It's interesting when we look at this whole notion of surrender, right? And how it plays with our will, because it's kind of a paradox, because it is an act of will to surrender, yet it defies the will in itself, right? So Gia says, surrender to me is all about not expecting a certain result, to be able to flow with what is and what is going to be. Faith is I think it's a key. Faith is the key to surrender. You know, I think that's true. Trust, to be able to trust that you're going to be okay. You know, that and I faith and trust, that's also another interesting conversation to see how those two are intertwined. So Rosalind says surrendering feels safe to lower the shield, relinquish resistance. I like that. Yeah, so the relinquish resistance, that's really what I see in terms of the positive aspects. You know, if we're going to look at spiritual surrender, then that's really what we're looking at, is relinquishing the resistance. And that's what we talk about when we talk about presence anyway. You know, when we're locked into our beliefs and our identities, then we're resisting. You know, we're resisting the connection and oneness that we are in our foundational being. So Elaine says, I've been invited to speak on another live today with another group. It was nice to hang out. Have a blessed day and lovely day, you guys. Elaine, thanks so much for joining us. It's always a pleasure having you, and I'm sure it'll be awesome to hear what you have to say on another live. So maybe you can maybe you can share a link or something so that folks can check it out. Anyway, yeah, so relinquishing resistance, what does that look like, and how do we do that through an act of will? How do we relinquish resistance? I was going to say existence, which would be pretty funny, right? And maybe that is where the resistance is, you know, is that our false sense of identification with our identities is keeping us or having us resist being extinguished, right? The fear of disappearing, the fear of losing our sanity, our sense of self, our connection with what we perceive as reality, and moving into the unknown. Like, who will I be if I let go of this pattern that I'm so identified by? So I think I probably mentioned this before, but I have a client that I'm working with a client on a pattern that we've identified, which is one of many. Whoops. Which is one of many, but this pattern is really interesting, which is the belief, the strong belief that if I don't worry, I'm not being responsible. And you can imagine the whole complex that this sets up, you know, is having to be in a place of worry all the time in order to be being responsible. You know, and obviously responsibility is a value. And so in order to uphold that value, I need to worry all the time. So especially if you have a lot of things on your plate, you're trying to make a difference in the world, you're engaged with lots of people and lots of projects, that's kind of a recipe for disaster, isn't it? And interestingly, you know, rather than just being able to surrender that idea and that belief and that dynamic, there's part of this person that is just fighting as hard as they can to keep that dynamic in place. And it's just fascinating. It's fascinating how committed to that suffering people can be, self included. You know, there are places, certainly in my life, there are places that I've not yet identified or untangled where I generate suffering for myself and am dogged in that commitment. You know, it's when we start recognizing that and it starts to unfurl, it's an uncomfortable experience oftentimes, you know, to be dismembering those kinds of associations. It doesn't necessarily come easy. So I think that might be it for this morning on our conversation about surrender. But maybe there'll be more with the Wizard of Oz tomorrow. And I'm thinking that would be a really fun conversation. Anyway, that's it for this morning. I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection, and I go live each weekday morning here on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page. And please, please check out the other awesome programming on Enlightened World Network, Enlightened World Living, EWN One with the Earth, and all of this on Facebook. So until next time, it is such a joy and pleasure and privilege to spend this time with you guys. I just am so grateful and appreciate you so deeply. So until next time, so much love to you. Hopefully I get to see you again soon.